This is the Heather Patero Show, where conversation meets calling. Well, welcome to the Heather Patero Show. Hi, friends. Hey, guess what? Today's a really special one for me because my guest is one of the artists I grew up with. If you grew up in the contemporary Christian music world in the 80s and the 90s, you already know this is not some random name I pulled out of a hat. Steve Camp's music was part of the soundtrack for a whole lot of us. His voice, his songs, his conviction. He brought something strong and unmistakable to an era that left a real mark. Over the course of a long career, Steve has released 22 albums, earned a Grammy, notched more than 15 number one songs and more than 40 top 10s, and built a legacy that stretches far beyond the studio. He's been a pastor, he's written books, challenged people, stirred things up, and from everything I can tell, he has never been terribly interested in pretending to be something he's not. And honestly, I love that because Steve Camp was never background music. He was not just pleasant little Jesus music while you organize your Tupperware. No, Steve Camp came in with conviction, musicianship, fire, and lyrics that would grab you by the collar and say, are we actually going to live this thing out or just sing about it? I have loved him for that for a very long time. But before we get one more inch into the career, the records, the ministry, and all the glorious ways that Steve has made people think deeply, I have to say this. I didn't just love Steve Camp's music as a listener. I connected with it as a piano musician, singer, songwriter in an era when the guitar was king. And for me, as a young pianist, singer, and songwriter, that really mattered, and it still does. Steve, you're forever one of my faves. Full stop. Welcome to the Heather Patero Show.
Oh my goodness, what a sweet introduction. Thank you so very much. I love the Tupperware line, so I appreciate that greatly, but an honor to be with you here today and to see your studio and to hear of your work and music. May your tribe increase. That's awesome what you're doing. So real pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. Well, listen, I have to start at the bench because anybody who knows me knows I'm a total piano nerd to the bone. And you are just one of those artists who made me feel like that was a real and beautiful thing to be. So I'm going to selfishly enjoy this part of our conversation. So take me back.
Okay.
How old were you when the piano first got its hooks in you?
Wow, great question. I started playing piano as just a wee little lad at age 5, 6, 7 years old. My mom thought it'd be great if I learned the piano, and I took piano for maybe 6 months, and I was just too active to stay focused and seated the whole time, especially when all of my buddies were outside playing football or doing something fun that way. But then I picked up the guitar, and I've never been a lead player, just a rhythm player. I enjoy figuring out chords. I use it, for songwriting. But then in high school, when I started a band in high school doing music, we didn't have a keyboard player. And I thought, wow, I need to pick this up. Again, we had a great drummer, bass player, but an excellent guitarist. And I thought, man, I need to learn how to play piano again. So I just started to dive in and play by ear, and I gravitated to great singer-songwriters, even orchestrators that would invert chords in a unique way. One of my favorite artists as a piano player was Elton John, and always had such interesting voicings. Well, I got to work with his arranger, Paul Buckmaster, with the London Philharmonic years after starting in CCM Music. And it was wonderful. And he says, man, you voice things like a friend of mine. And we were in the studio, and it was so much fun going through. And I said, Paul, I've learned how to play piano by listening to your arrangements. Everything had a second, a ninth, a 13th, an 11th, something in there that opened up the chord for me. And so I was always trying to figure out different chords. However, at that time, in the 70s, going to Wheaton Bible Church, growing up in Wheaton, Illinois, people weren't too familiar with CCM music back then. And so the pastor, when he would ask me to sing special music on Sunday night, I would use an acoustic guitar or a piano. And he would take me out for lunch that week and always encouraging. And he said, "Hey, don't be discouraged. I had another 3 families leave the church because your music was too contemporary for them."
Oh,
And I know, crazy, right? Thinking back on those days. And even Moody Bible Institute, WMBI, I love that station, part of my upbringing, but they would say we could read the lyrics from your songs. So when I would be on for an interview like this, they would read the lyrics, but they couldn't play the music because it wouldn't fit a more churchy format, even though I grew up in the church, loved the church. So yeah, just that's when the piano got its hooks on me early on. But I just love it even to this day. And to see great piano players, like Charlie Puth today or
oh,
Jacob Collier. I mean, he
I
does
know.
everything amazing,
Yes.
you know. But Jackson Brown, all those artists I grew up with. My dear friend, the late Keith Green, amazing piano player. And so, it's always been the main instrument that I always come back to. In fact, my wife Cindy and I, when we have one of our little grandkids who lives 10 minutes from us here in Fort Pierce, Florida, she goes over to the piano now. She's 5 and she kind of plunks down a little bit. And so we're like, oh, this would be great. My wife's a graduate of Juilliard in the violin
Oh, wow.
and is an amazing musician. And she says, I want to teach her how to start piano. It's a great instrument
Yeah.
to learn music with. And so it's been the mainstay for songwriting all those years. I've had little uprights where half the keys were missing, and I've had a beautiful 9-foot concert Baldwin I found a few years ago and just love it. Everything in between, electric keyboards as well. It's been such a great instrument to use. And I thank the Lord for it that he allows me to use it in the writing, the crafting of most songs that I've written throughout the years.
Yeah. Well, do you remember a favorite song you learned early on? Because, every piano player has that one song you played until your family begged that it would rapture.
Yes. One of the first songs I ever learned, it was a Christmas song. It was Jingle Bells. And I would play that till they, were like, get this kid off the piano. It's too much. And so, yeah, it started with that. I wish I had a more biblical, spiritual response of a great hymn of the church, but it was literally Jingle Bells
Hey,
that I learned just as a young child.
Well, God can redeem everything, right?
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
So in that era, so many singer-songwriters were guitar driven. That 80s was so influential in my life as a
Yeah.
church kid. And Stryper was out, Mylon Lefevre and Broken Heart, just
Yeah.
all those bands seemed to be guitar driven. So did being piano based ever make you feel like you were standing in a different lane, or was it just so naturally your own voice that you just didn't think about it?
I didn't think about it, but I also played rhythm guitar as well. So when I would go out and do a solo concert, I would have an acoustic or classical guitar with me, as well as the acoustic piano. So I always would float back and forth between the two of those instruments. I used tracks from time to time, was never a big track fan. I always thought, man, let's hear it live. Let's hear the real artist come out in the music. Occasionally you have to have some of the tracks, and we all went through that phase together. But you know what? Because I had a little bit of the guitar always thrown in, it wasn't that dramatic. However, when you have a guy like Phil Keaggy that was on stage playing guitar like nobody else did at that
Yes.
time at all, and Phil was just such a master at the instrument, you just think, I think I'll put this back in the case and I'll just stay with my piano today at the festival or whatever. So, it was great. In the studio through all those years, I've always been so honored to meet great guitar players. I remember the first time I met Larry Carlton, who is a great jazz player, the guitar behind great artists like Steely Dan and Joni Mitchell and others. I mean, he played his solo on Kid Charlemagne for Steely Dan in one take was considered one of the great solos of all time. And so I've been able to work with him and Michael Landau, Dan Huff, the incredible Dan Huff, who started in a Christian band called Whiteheart and then literally took over the studio in LA and in Nashville, became a world-class musician as well as a great producer. So I've always been able to work in those sessions with great guitar players, always amazed at how they were able to bring through a different voicing, different effects, a coloration. And I learned how to complement with the piano some of those guitar things that they were doing. So as time went on, Heather, it was interesting to see the piano and the guitar not too far from each other, and their assimilation of how we would interpret some of the songs. I'm a singer-songwriter by label, as it were. And so I would always try to craft a song, hearing in the background the guitar player maybe doing some of this. But in the studio, I never came that prepared on purpose of saying, I want you to play this and only this. Some producers, some artists work that way. It's just not my style. I like for that person, that musician, to feel like they're contributing artistically to that song. And I think it gives a depth of interpretation of a lyric of music. I'm sure you come from a similar school, whether it be a ukulele or a mandolin or a great acoustic player. Those things can really work in a beautiful way. In fact, on the new album, I have a song called Sea of Tears taken out of the Song of Solomon that I wrote for my wife. It's not that she makes me cry all the time. That's not the purpose of the song. But it's a beautiful love song. And I have played it, and Phil Keaggy was in the studio doing some of the other songs, and he got out his acoustic guitar. And so it will show for my first and only album credit I've ever had with Phil that both of us played guitar on that tune. I told him, I said, just replace what I've done. He goes, no, I like it, squeaks and all. And so, you know what? It's been kind of fun, full circle, to see that the heart of that instrument could come through, even though I'm not proficient with it, but in the interpretation of a song or a songwriting kind of situation, it's worked. So the blending of those things was always the magic for me coming into a studio session.
Yeah, I love that you're a collaborative artist. I am as well. And I think it's better when we work together and we all add our own art to the pot, if you will,
Yes, absolutely.
So, I tell you, one thing that probably has not changed, but maybe in a lot of ways it has changed, when you were coming up and as a signed artist and everything, there was this grind behind the calling, because I work with a lot of artists. I do artist development in my studio, and it seems like it's harder now in a lot of ways than it was back then, but in some ways it's easier because of the invention of YouTube and the access to be able to record more cheaply and access to AI and things like that. Where do you stand on all of that? The hustle now compared to the hustle back then?
Boy, that's a great question. I remember out of high school, I was never one. I spent maybe one quarter at Wheaton College auditing classes. College of DuPage, I went there for a year, got some basic fundamental classes in. But from age 19 or so on, I started hitting the road and doing concerts and things. And as we were talking pre-show today, of doing several different things. I mean, I sung at everywhere from restaurants to pool halls, in my very first concert, where a church called and said, we'd love to have you out, was by a theologian named R.C. Sproul.
Oh, wow.
And R.C., a dear friend of mine, Ligonier Ministries, now with the Lord. But I was driving from Wheaton out when he was based out of Pittsburgh area. And I got there and I showed up at the church and they said, Steve, what are you doing here? You're early. It's not the 12th of this month. It's the 21st of this month.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, I've got a letter here from someone. They said, oh, they put down the wrong date.
Oh no.
And so I called RC and stuff. And we found a little room off the sanctuary. And here the church was sizable. It wasn't his church, but the church, it was about 1,200 people it could seat. And I had no music out, no record or anything released or recorded. But here, I think we ended up calling a few people, and they had 8 or 10 people come out. And the whole drive out there, you're thinking this plateau of grandeur that, oh, this is going to turn people on fire for the Lord, and revival's going to break out, new reformation. It's going to be great. And you end up with 8 or 10 people on a couch in an annex room off the sanctuary. And so RC came and he said, I want to ask you one question. And this was privately, but he said, the Lord requires 2 or 3 to be together in his name. How many do you require? And it really set my heart in the right place. So I went out and I said, hey, we're going to order some pizza. And we just made it a musical journey of faith and playing songs together early on. But I did everything from busking outside in some streets to doing church-related events. So by the time the mid-'70s hit and I had my first record deal with a label called Mums Records, they had a band called Steppenwolf on there, Albert Hammond, All You Need Is the Air That I Breathe, and different ones. And then Clive Davis, who had purchased the label, but he called me and said, listen, I don't know if you realize this, but every one of your songs mentions Jesus.
You didn't realize that, did you, Steve?
Didn't realize it. Yeah, well, I guess I fell asleep during those sessions. But he said, if you could just change the name of Jesus to Baby, you'd have a great record.
Oh, my goodness.
I said, man, I was all of 20 years old at this point, and I said, listen, I'll write you the best love songs I can, but I don't want to amputate my songs of faith. That's the nucleus, the nexus of what drives my life. And so he gave me back my songs and so forth. I had released only one single, and then I sent them to Word Records the next year, and I had made a demo album, and it was called Saying It With Love, and that became the first album that came out in 1977. And so from that point on, it was all those little journeys of music hitting the road before ever having the release of a record. Long answer to your short question. But, having that time to play everything, all size of venues, all kinds of environments, whether it be a little club in town, whether it be coffee houses were the big deal back then. The Jesus movement coming out of that in the early 70s. And so you learned how to hone your craft by being in front of an audience 100 times a year. And it didn't matter if they paid you or not. Most of the time you got gas money back then, plus $50 so you could grab a burger or something and eat for a few days. So I think then that testing ground that really proved you, is this the stuff of just whim and fancy? And is it just, I want to be a singer, I want to be a songwriter? Because when you're on the road, and especially if you have a band and you're in a U-Haul truck, and, it's like a bad John Candy movie, at Christmas time, but you're not playing polka music. It's one of those things that really weeds out that kind of motive and direction. Today, as you know, brand new artists never have done a concert before, have maybe written 2 songs, are pre-packaged, computerized, harmonized. I mean, it's just pasteurized into this same sounding mentality where it's not the artist, it's just music by parroting. There's not even a real heartfelt ground of proving and testing. So I agree wholeheartedly with your statement. Today, how exciting to have Pro Tools and Logic and, Cubase software, all kinds of things where you can show up with your laptop and make a song. It may not sound good. It may not be recorded good, but, I was always in the old 2-inch tape and, you'd hire a real engineer. And that's the thing today. I have an engineer coming over tomorrow at our home studio here because I don't want to be one of those artists that think, great, I've got all this software, all this online instruments and different things I've downloaded and plugins, and therefore I can do it all. I mean, you can pull your own teeth. It's a little messy, but you can get the job done. The same thing with writing music. You can write it all yourself, play it all yourself, do it all. At some point, you lose the heart and the soul of what drove that music to begin with. So I'm of the firm opinion, Heather, that today I wish young kids, and again, we've got 7 kids in our family, adult kids, and half of them are involved in music. Great writers. One does country music. We have a son, Marshall, who does hip hop and rap, and the guy is an amazing freestyler. I always tell people, I'm living proof white men can't dance. Marshall's living proof that they can. But Maxfield, he sent me 2 new songs last night. Amazing stuff. Sounds beautiful. And one he goes, Dad, you think this is a hit? And what about this one? The one that he sent me, the second song was a praise song. I said, this song is huge. Do this. It's wonderful to see that after all these years that we get to co-write songs together. In fact, on this new album, most of the families on this record, as well as great studio players. So I'm glad it didn't happen overnight for any of my kids, because they're having to learn how to pick themselves up, handle rejection, hone the craft, be in that crucible with other writers, other people. I mean, Heather, I remember being downtown in Chicago, and to pay the bills early on, I did commercials. I did free dent chewing gum commercials. I did what they called a free spot for McDonald's, free, and it was, singing music for commercials. And Macomb Savings and Loan was one of my first commercial spots out in this little bank out in the middle of nowhere. And, it would pay anywhere from $100 to a few $1,000 of royalties coming in, and it really honed. But my first time going in to sing a commercial, the producer, it was for a Christmas spot with a major company. And I thought, wow, this could be huge. And I went in and I was warming up, and I did one vocal run through, and the producer said, hey, Steve, thank you very much, but we won't be needing you today. And, sign this form. We'll send you your minimum for the hour you were here. And I was just devastated. And the gentleman that recommended me, he said, don't be discouraged. This is the process. It's good for you to be rejected. Turn that into a positive. Go to school on yourself. And so I think that those days are missing today for a lot of artists. We did a little outdoor event here a few years ago, and they had a young gal that was part of the artistry. And when they interviewed her ahead of time, they said, what's your goal in life? And she said, she was all of 16. She goes, world domination. And I thought, oh no one's ever told her you really can't sing. And to contact someone like you, Heather, that could teach her how to sing and develop her craft. So I think that that's something that is really missing today. If I could say, bring back the old days where you've got to go through a grid of proving yourself while having access to all this great technology, let's see the marriage of those worlds come together. But to see one amputative of another, I don't think really helps someone. At the Grammys, last little example, at the Grammys a few years ago, up for the rock or blues category album, they had all these young artists, and the artist that won it was Bonnie Raitt, one of my favorite singers in the world. And all these young artists were looking around going, who's Bonnie Raitt? Why did she win?
I know.
And then they finally heard her sing, and they realized she had put out dozens of albums and had been a mainstream vocalist for so many years. And I think that's missing today. So anyway, if you're a younger artist listening today, get with Heather, get with someone like that that's not only gifted in the arts, but gifted in teaching to hone your craft. That's going to make a difference down the road. Take your time to learn that music is more than just inspiration. What is the old Einstein line? It's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration.
Perspiration,
It's
yeah.
a lot of hard work. And when I would do seminars when living in Nashville at Belmont University, I would try to discourage artists that would come in that weren't really gifted to say, I really don't think this is for you. And they would go out of there crying. I wasn't mean to them personally, but they would be devastated. I said, listen, if getting a no from me can devastate you, that's sure proof that you don't have the constitution to handle this. So a toughness of skin and biblical principles. We put our hand to the plow and never look back. We deny ourselves every day, take up our cross and follow the Lord. There is a step by step, a biblical walk in the faith that proves that the trials and the testings prove genuine faith, genuine saving faith. If you see someone that's come into Christianity and they're always at this superficial, not even the deepness of joy before the Lord, but a superficial happiness, at some point, the cares of this world are going to so weigh down on them. They've come in cheaply and they have left by cheap grace. And it's the same thing. We don't promote cheap grace in the gospel. We shouldn't promote a cheap view of the arts, considering the Psalms are the largest book in the Bible, 150 Psalms. The longest chapter, Psalm 119, 176 verses, and they're all songs. And so the Lord left us the hymnal of heaven in Holy Writ. He didn't preserve the melodies. He preserved the lyrics. So what does that mean? You and I get to put new melodies to these great, great lyrics to encourage people in the Lord. Well, the same thing in the craft of music. David in worship brings together out of Chronicles. It said they were skilled in the law, but they were also skilled in the craft of the musician, the craft of music. So it's not just anyone should get up and do it. You should have a calling, a skill, and a craft. That takes time to develop, and that crucible of grace that you can be in for years of learning that. Now, it's not always the case, but in years of careful study, don't poo-poo those years. Those are years of refinement to develop you as an artist, as a musician.
Sure. Well, everything's content now. One of the number one Christian artists right now is actually a made up AI. I mean, they even created like a backstory, like he's from Mississippi or something, and they have a picture of him, and everything's about content. Yeah, songs are content, sermons are content, breakfast is content if the lighting is good enough and the avocado behaves, But you came from an era where a song had to stand up on its own 2 feet. It wasn't about being trendy or useful, and your songs felt like they were always trying to say something and not just sound good. You balanced the message with the music without letting it flatten each other too. And nowadays I have friends that are Nashville writers, and they get in a big room and everything's so cookie cutter. And in fact, when I produced my album about 10 years ago, I had a Nashville producer, and I'm from Atlanta. The vibe is different in Atlanta. And
sure is.
I wanted a hip hop artist on one of my songs. Your son would appreciate that because I'm from Atlanta. Outkast is from here, Arrested Development. And he's from Nashville. And the guy was like, well, why do you want a hip hop artist on your track? And I said, because I'm from Atlanta and I'm not trying to be a cookie cutter Nashville. And that's even 10 years ago. The industry has changed so much. Yeah. It seems like, from what it was in the 80s and the 70s, But you're right about Bonnie Raitt. It's crazy. Sandy Patty, I've been seeing a lot of videos on my Facebook feed. She's trying to reinvent herself.
It's true.
A lot of these older artists, they're trying to kind of live off of the past of what they created, but kind of still reinvent themselves and continue because they're still living.
No, that's
right. They're still breathing. They still have art in them. They still have a calling on their life, right?
Well, when I signed with Word Records, there was another artist with Myrrh Records at the time that was also starting out at the same time, and that's Amy Grant. And Amy now has just come out with her first album in 13 years. She's been through some pain in her life. You know, she had a terrible bicycle accident that we all read about where she went through brain trauma with it. And boy, she said it was no easy way back to working through brain injuries. And it took her 3 or 4 years, apparently, to get through that. Well, she's put together a record now. I've only heard 1 or 2 songs. It comes out this week, I believe. But here, after 13 years, finally coming out with another record. I just released a new album myself called Neighbors in an Age of Rage, trying to deal with a lot of the social issues and things that are out there right now. And so I haven't put out an album in several years. I asked my producer, I said, man, I just turned 71 this year. Is this too late to release a record? And they said, are you kidding? The Stones are in their early 80s, mid 80s. You know, I said, well, good. I got another 15 years in me here if the Lord graces me with it. But you know what? I'm glad to see a lot of the foundational artists again come out with a new breed of music. Some of it, like with all of us, is not going to be stellar. Every now and again, we'll hit a great new song. And to be able to share that. And you know, Heather, you and I, we're blessed to be able to do this because even if no one paid us to do this at all, whether it be through a ticket sale, a love offering, an honorarium, whatever it may be, we'd do it for free, wouldn't we? We would do it even if we weren't journeymen with it, even if we weren't making our full income with it. There's such a love that drives this. My daughter, Mary Camp, she said, Dad, when she was visiting here with us, she said, Dad, you're a young 70-year-old, 71-year-old. You're young. Why is that? I said, it's the music. It keeps you young. You don't feel like you ever grow old, even though a 5-second look in the mirror would go, oh, there's a few more crow's feet. That's okay. I've earned those stripes. But you know what? It's great through all those years to see God's faithfulness, and music is timeless in being able to create these new songs for another generation to either listen to sing. You blew my mind, though, Heather, with that. I didn't I'm not a big fan of AI. I guess there's certain aspects of it where it can help. I mean, if you're Elon Musk designing a new rocket booster, man, have at it. But if they're coming to write a new song, I've seen these things on Facebook and so forth, and my wife will go, honey, is that AI or is that a real artist? And I'll look down, and she showed me where to look to it to see if it's AI because they have to list it. And a lot of it is AI. Amazing vocals, all these different things.
It's rude.
And I'm like, it's rude. It actually is. Yeah, because why is it? Who told somebody that you have to be wrinkle-free, everything on pitch, all the time, perfectly, with no imperfections whatsoever? That's not our lives. It's not our lives spiritually in the Lord. It's not our lives daily as people. And the art should not be disconnected from that. So I hear that there are AI artists, but I didn't know there was AI Christian artists.
Oh, absolutely. In every genre right now, there's an AI artist. And they've created a backstory and everything.
Unbelievable.
Well, listen, I want the folks to hear one of the songs off your album and hear the craft and the conviction we've been talking about. Let's hear Ain't All About Ya. Real briefly, tell us about why you wrote that.
Yeah. Well, this is a song. It's one of the few songs on the album I didn't write, but I heard it. A dear friend of mine who is also the producer of the album, Tim Miner, wrote this song. True story. He was we were in the studio and he was playing this. And I said, what is that track? He goes, oh, I was just cleaning up old songs. That song was written originally 34 years ago for a movie soundtrack that Al Green was supposed to be singing. It had a different lyric, a different message. The movie team passed on the song. I said, and he co-wrote it with Dionne Warwick's son. And I said, are you willing to rewrite the lyric? And he said, let me give it a shot. And then we replaced a lot of the instruments. However, the horn section on here is Tom Scott and the LA Express, some great individual studio guys from the past. But this was a song, it came out recently, and it was top 10 through, we couldn't believe it, through England and the UK, the Nordic countries, Latin America. I mean, all these different places. And we don't have a record company. I don't have a manager. We don't have the kind of money to hire out promotional teams and, plugging a song kind of publicity folk. This is an old song the Lord saved for me to do on this record. And I'm just absolutely thrilled with it that it came out so good. I have to give props to Tim. He's playing lead guitar on this, and we had some fun little moments with it that I think your listeners will recognize with it. But it's called "Ain't All About You."
Okay, well, let's hear it. Here's Steve Camp with "Ain't All About You." Oh, Steve, that was awesome. Man, that's so cool. I love it. And I'm a firm believer that a good song is a good song, no matter when it's written or, it's
Yeah,
timeless. It's kind of why certain songs just are sticking around and so many covers are being made of older songs. And
that's right.
I recently interviewed Bernie Nelson on the show, and he's a Nashville Row songwriter. He wrote a lot of the country hits that we loved in the 80s. And, one of the things that he
Awesome.
said was that he can't stand it when people think that the singer that made it famous think that they wrote the song too. And, because it leaves out the writer, right? And
Yeah.
it's so true, that a good song is a good song no matter what, but we do need to give credit. And I think that's one thing I miss about the way that we do digital music now. You can't take an album or even the cassette. You remember or CD notes, and we just pull it out and you could read all the credits and who produced it and who played tambourine.
I would spend hours doing that. That was my reading library, all the album credits from hundreds of records every year. Yeah.
Well, listen, you have never exactly built your life around making everybody comfortable. And I say that with admiration and maybe a tiny bit of Lord help the rest of us. But one of the things that people associate with you is the 107 Theses. I want to be honest. I know the broad strokes, but I don't want to explain your own history back to you. So for listeners who may not know that part of your story, take us there. What were they and what was happening in you at that time?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. I was traveling through Europe. I had grown up, again, in a Bible church background, but with different mentors like Stephen Olford, who started Billy Graham in ministry, with R.C. Sproul, with Dr. John MacArthur, various ones like this, men of God that became very good friends over the years. They loaded me up with books and things. And so I would carry 2 large pilot briefcases with me on the road always. One would have about a dozen different translations of the Bible. One was packed full of theological works, and I would read 2 to 3 books a week and so forth. So my heroes of the faith were not the great Christian singers or even the pop singers of the day. It was the John Gills and the John Bunyans, the John Calvins, the Martin Luthers, the Solomon Stoddards, the Matthew Meads, the George Whitfields, all of these great men of God throughout the ages that the Lord had used. And so here, what had happened was during that time touring Europe, I was concluding that tour in England with an evangelist, Louis Palau, at that time. And it was interesting. We had about 10 days off, so I told my sound man, hey, let's go to Wittenberg in Germany, where the Reformation was born with Martin Luther. And in your mind, before you attend those places, the cobblestone streets there, seeing the little nook where he would have breakfast in the morning in his kitchen area, training all these great men of God in theology. His church, where you'd climb up those multiple steps going up to the top, and some of the life stories seen in the church where he and Philip Melanchthon had preached, but now they were buried at the back of that church. I got to know the curator there, and he allowed me to come in, and I got to ascend the steps to see where Luther preached from. What did that look like? Just a personal, treasured moment in my own life at that point. But what happened was, as I was going through that area of Germany, I was asking people, well, what are you doing here? What do you do? And I would sing a song in a pub for them or whatever it may be. And they would say, Steve, we need a new Reformation today. Many of them knew the history, obviously, of Luther in a profound way. And so I thought, I'm going to begin to write. If Luther was alive today, what would those 95 theses that he pounded on the Wittenberg's door back in the year 1517, what would it look like in that year, 1997, if we had a new 95 Theses? And so all the way home on the airplane, I was borrowing scraps of paper. I had run out of a little notepad. I was writing like crazy. No iPads then to dial into and so forth. But I was assembling all these little pieces of paper. And I got home with scraps of paper this thick, and I started to assemble them in several different categories. And at that time, that's what sparked it overseas. But at that time, in American Christian music, I'd served on the board of the GMA for many years, always thought we should do away with the Dove Awards. It was just a cheap little imitation of a Grammy. And I thought, why are we parroting the secular music community when they're looking for a better example anyway? Why be self-motivated to simply vote for each other, pat each other on the back at the end of a year of service? Why can't we do something a bit more radical? So every year I was calling for that thing to be dissipated and let it go the way of all award shows. Well, here, during that time, all the pop secular labels, the big companies were buying up all of the labels. I was on Sparrow Records for many years. I wanted to be on that label because Second Chapter of Acts and Keith Green and Phil Keaggy, all these great artists were on that label. It became known as the ministry label. You mentioned cassette tapes. They had those blue cassette tapes. You could spot them anywhere, right? And I tell people now I had 8-track tapes, blue cassette tapes, CDs, now MP3s, all these it's just different formats. But then it was all of Christian music had been bought up by 3 or 4 large conglomerations out there in terms of enterprise. They were taking the name of Jesus and they were taking our Lord and his gospel and making it a widget that they could sell and profit off of. This was like Simon the sorcerer out of the book of Acts. And so it was that kind of thing. I remember Jimmy Bowen came up to me, who discovered Garth Brooks at a country western party I had attended. He said, "Is your name Steve?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "I'm Jimmy Bowen." I said, "Well, sir, nice to meet you." Arguably at that time, probably one of the three top music moguls in the entire world, especially after the success that he brought to Garth Brooks. He said, "Are you the young man that's a thorn in my side?" And I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Because I'm buying up Christian music." He goes, "Isn't the purpose to get it sold more so that people can hear your message?" I said, "Well, the purpose is to also protect the integrity of the message by the integrity of the messenger and keeping the message itself biblical. Scripture deals with all of life. Let the message be, through the lens of God's word, dealing with all of life." But I told him, I said, "Sir, God's judgment will be on you. You're taking the name of Christ and, again, treating him like cheap retail merchandise. He won't stand for it. God will not be mocked." And I had just been writing these theses at the time. So that's why at the beginning of the preamble, it's all about a call to reformation and revival for the Christian music and Christian publishing industry. We could have extended it to the local church for accentuating that audience. But that's what it was for. It came out, we printed 10,000 copies of it, Heather. It came out on October 31st, 1997. October 31st, most people notice Halloween. It is known as Reformation Day. And it was October 31st, 1517. Is the day that Luther tacked that up at Wittenberg's door, the Facebook of his day, if you please, where those things would go up and people could articulate it. His students set the world on fire by producing those 95 theses and so forth, and made that something that was now available to the masses. Well, the same thing here. We put that out. And I remember one of the first groups that I saw going to a golf tournament where the guys in DC talk. And Toby said, "Well, man, you got us all talking. It's all we were talking about on the tour bus coming here." And it was a thing where I didn't realize the earth-shattering effect it would have on Nashville. Didn't change the industry. But I heard from more artists that said, "Off the record, we stand with you. What you're saying is absolutely true. But on the record, our labels already contacted us. If you side with Steve," they said, "on this issue, you're done." Promoters that I had worked with for years. I was going in for free and not charging for any of the concerts. And we would take an offering there. The promoters, one by one, were saying to me, we've been told by XYZ artist. I thought they were friends. And they would say, if we promote you, they will not get the main A-line artists that year for touring. They said, Steve, they're playing heavy politics. We don't want to lose our house. I get it. And then they said to me, I tried to order product from the labels that I was signed to, saying, hey, I have concerts the next week and a half. They would drop ship CDs and cassettes, or mostly CDs at that time. And one of the gentlemen at one of the distribution centers, he said, Steve, we're out of your product. And I said, oh, that's weird. I just ordered some 3 weeks ago. And they said that there were several thousand items there still that bookstores were ordering and so forth. They said, no one's told you? And I said, no. They said, we were told by the label, throw it all away. They said, why don't we give it to Steve? We don't want anything to do with him after he came out with this 107 Theses. I wasn't naive, Heather, but I thought in an area of pluralism where all opinions seemed, vibrant and encouraged and accepted, that there was a system of talk and freedom of speech back in 97. So this is 29 years ago, that people would bury you and play politics with you.
Sure. Well, you have always been a man that has lived out your truth. That is for sure. And I love that about you. Well, listen, let's switch gears a little bit. On your guest form that you filled out, you listed that you love great Bibles, great coffee, and great cologne. That is an unexpectedly refined little trio there, and that's not a random list. That is totally a man with standards. So let's take them one at a time. What makes a Bible great?
A Bible great. Well, there's a couple of different companies. Cambridge is the oldest Bible publisher in the world. Allen Publishers out of England, the original publishers of the King James Version. They've been at it for a while. And others here in the U.S. with Crossway and others. And they print today goatskin high-end leather covers that are double-stitched. They will last 100+ years. If you were to be in our home right now, we have bookshelves full of these, as well as in our outdoor home office back here, just packed with Bibles, and we end up giving so many away every year, especially to pastors, because we want them to have a great Bible to preach from.
Sure. So what makes coffee great?
Oh, it's the roasting and the elevation of the bean from which they are harvested. Great Bibles, great coffee, they go hand in hand.
I gotcha. Well, we've been to Guatemala and we've seen the process from tree to cup, so we're right there with you.
There you go.
So what makes cologne go from distinguished gentleman to sir, we can smell you from across the room?
Well, the sir, we can smell you from across the room, that may be a too much of an Old Spice or a Men in Skin bracer that someone has doused on in the morning. But I'm primarily a 2 cologne guy, mainly one. And it was my wife that started this. It's called Jo Malone, J-O, and then Malone. It's a woman. And she started developing these colognes out of her garage, and in England, in London. And ultimately, she became so successful. People loved it. And Estee Lauder bought her out. And so our daughter said to us, hey, there's a Jo Malone store down at the mall in West Palm, about 40 minutes away. I said, no, you got to be kidding me. So we went down there, and I'm telling you, it was like being at Baker Bookstore or, Demeter's coffee place. There was row upon row upon row of Jo Malone cologne. And I thought, what is this? It's a little costly, but you buy it every little bit. They also give out free testers so you can try it, wear it, and see, because your body chemistry has to do with it. So I became friends with the owners of this store. And they would say, hey, next time Steve comes in, if they can't sell it, they would send it back. They said, he loves all this. Let's just give it to him. So they literally almost, Heather, for every bottle, I was given 2 back. I mean, it wasn't that dramatic, but we've purchased a lot throughout the years. This is a long time. But then we would ask, we have a good friend now, Shari, who works down at a similar store down there. The other store closed its door. And she says, as we get in new cologne, I'm going to send you a tester and see what you think. So the whole point is, if you buy great cologne, you don't need a whole lot to just have a great, wonderful odor that other people will appreciate, a perfumed odor.
Well, one of the things that you said, eat dessert first. So when did that become law in your house?
It became law years ago, about 17, 18 years ago. Cindy and I had adopted it as one of the phrases, eat dessert first. Let's start with that. And so, we both just kind of went after it. The kids really gravitated to it. And it's something that we had put on a mug together in different things. And so, we think it's a fun way to start. When we go out to eat at a restaurant, we'll order a slice of key lime pie and share it. Or, some fresh ice cream or bread pudding, or if they're noted for certain desserts. And it's really great. And my wife has introduced me to a lot of different things as well. And she convinced me early on that chocolate was a vegetable. And so we've gravitated where she'll bring back home some days 86 proof chocolate, if I'm saying that correctly, where the real cocoa is like 80% or 86. And it's actually healthy if you have a little piece of it. So eat dessert first. If you can't finish the salad, that's one thing, but you want to make sure you get to the ice cream and finish that. So eat dessert first, work your way back, and end with the salad or the fruit plate, and it's a great way to go through life.
Yes, that's right. All right, Steve, it's time for quick fire. This is something that we do on the show every time.
Okay.
So, short answers, don't overthink it. No, let me take you to the Greek because I know you're a pastor. So I say this with love and a stopwatch. All right,
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Elton John, Billy Joel, or Jerry Lee Lewis. And please know that friendships may be affected.
Well, Billy Joel lives right down the street here, about an hour. And my piano technician works on his piano. So I'm going to have to go with Billy Joel.
Okay. All right. Sustain pedal, friend, weapon, or emotional support animal?
Essential in good keyboard playing, sustain pedal, yes.
Okay. Best Beatles song, Coffee, Black, Cream, or Don't Ruin the Bean?
Don't ruin the bean, black all the way.
Harder to fake, humility, groove, conviction, or good hair in the 80s?
Where do you get these lists? I want to say true conviction is hard to fake, no question. But, if I'm just talking pragmatically, groove, it's either there or it's not there, so you can't fake. I always tell people, if you have a great drummer, you have a great band. If you have an average drummer, you have an average band.
Right.
So groove, you just can't fake. It's either there or it's not. So I'll go with groove.
Okay. So if Don't Shoot Me, I'm Just the Piano Player became merch, are we making a mug, a t-shirt, or a church lobby warning sign?
A church warning sign. Absolutely.
Best studio smell, coffee, old wood, warm gear, or someone else paying for the session?
I want to say, if I can add one item, fresh 2-inch tape from back in the day. When I would save my money and get a new reel of tape, we would put that on a tape machine in the studio, and we'd all lean in and smell it for hours. I mean, it was literally that kind of deal. And it was like, we get to record on this 2-inch tape. You can't do that with a hard drive. So anyway, studio smell, I want to say the 2-inch tape, but the warm decor, all of that goes into it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. A producer says, play it again. Is that an encouraging note or emotional trauma?
You know what? It could be because he wants to blend 2 or 3 takes together. If he says play it again the 10th time, it means you're not getting it and let's move on.
Yeah. So vinyl, CD, streaming, or please stop making me choose between my children.
The best sounding out of all those, vinyl, no question.
Oh yeah, my son is a huge vinyl head. He's only 23 and
Oh,
but my
very
son,
cool.
I'll tell you something cool about my son that you'll really appreciate because we're older parents. He listens to Kate Smith, Tennessee Ernie Ford, but he loves the latest electronics house music, so he's crazy with very diverse.
Good for him.
One song you wish you had written.
Yesterday by Paul McCartney.
Oh, yeah. One thing young artists worry about way too much.
Image.
One thing older artists should stop complaining about.
Wrinkles and a few extra pounds. It happens to all of us.
Image. Just say it.
Image.
Image.
There you
It's
go.
the same thing. Yeah. If you could sit in one recording session in history, where are you sneaking in?
Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper.
Okay. All right. A piano is out of tune. Do you suffer silently, leave the room, or call it sanctification?
It's definitely sanctification. And the first call I'm making is to my piano tech, Tom Servinsky. And I'll hold off on recording till he gets there to put the magic back in. I'm out of tune enough. I don't need to have the piano out of tune.
Best key to write a sad song in.
D minor is the saddest of all keys.
Oh, yeah. Best key to write a hopeful song in.
E flat major.
Only a pianist would say a flat key. That's the thing about playing with guitarists. They hate flat keys. So
yeah, exactly.
All right. You get one backing band for a night. Motown, Muscle Shoals, The Wrecking Crew, or a bunch of church musicians who can't transpose anything by ear and still make lunch.
Motown, girl. No question.
All right. All right. If younger Steve walked into the room right now, would you hug him, warn him, laugh at him, or tell him to fix his hair?
What,
Sorry, I couldn't say it with a straight face.
You didn't like that severe mullet I had back in the day? Yeah, I'd probably say, sit down, cut your hair, don't worry so much, and let me talk to you about this industry, and then don't make it about image, make it about the craft of the writing. Enjoy yourself, smile more. Yeah, I would sit down and give that younger Steve counsel.
That's awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. For the person listening who is trying to stay faithful, tell the truth, keep creating, and not quit when it gets costly, what would you say to them today?
One great thing, little verse, Psalm 119:54. David says this, thy statutes are my songs in the house of my pilgrimage. The pilgrimage means the place of sojourning. Literally, this world is not my home. I'm just passing through. The Lord does not leave us without a song in our hearts and a song to sing. His statutes are songs. His theology, our doxology. His word, our music. There's a reason that Paul and Silas could sing at midnight in the middle of a jail cell. Why? Because it was still a place that they were the prisoner of the Lord, and they were able to sing praise to God even in the most difficult of situations. So keep God's word the most important thing, doing its work in the most important place, your heart, and keeping our foot from sliding, as Psalm 37 would say. But statutes for songs in the house of my pilgrimage. Read the word every day, study it, be informed as a believer, and share it then with someone else that needs good news today in their lives.
And for the artist listening, the musician, writer, worship leader, songwriter, or creative person who wants to do meaningful work but feels the pressure to chase trends, give them some practical advice to leave with today.
Yeah, fantastic question. Number one, I don't allow the culture to squeeze you into its mold. Don't allow an A&R representative at a record company a publicist, a manager try to reinvent you, change your name, take you out for a shopping mall session of trying to package you and put clothes on you that don't fit, be yourself, be an individual. One of the great singers in pop music history is Bob Dylan. And you might think, how does saying, you got to sue somebody, how is that great singing? It works for him. He's an individual. And that's the thing. Be yourself. Don't be cookie cutter. God made you in a certain way. God wired you up with a certain voice. Listen, I don't sing like Steve Green or Russ Taff or some of these great singers, but he's given me a voice. It may be a little raspy. Someone came up to me after a concert years ago, Heather, and said, "Are you okay? Are you sick? Do you have a cough or a bad sore throat?" And I said, "No, that's how I sound." Seriously? And, they couldn't believe it.
I think it's cool.
Yeah. And so, you know what? We all have our gifting in that way. And it's like, be yourself. Now, in doing so, you can be influenced by so many great artists in listening to their songs. For me, I love everything from Oscar Peters, to Mozart. It can be James Taylor to Billy Joel. It can be Dark Side of the Moon, to Sgt. Pepper, and everything in between. Make it a great wealth of music. True story. Elton John says when he gets stuck on a melody or a chord pattern, he pulls out one thing at his house to help him write fresh, and it's a hymnal. And he goes through the old hymns of the church. And that's how he wrote a song like, "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me." Different things like that. He drew his inspiration from that which had been time-tested for hundreds of years. Be yourself. Ask the Lord to give you a voice that will communicate His word, His truth, and speak to the areas of the culture that you live in, the world that He has asked you to occupy. And listen, you don't need to have a record deal to be a real artist. You can busk on the street for $20 and make it your life's calling. You can be on Broadway, praise God, and make that your life's calling. You can be not even a performing artist. You can be a musician and remain faceless, as it were, and help others in their craft. You can be a singer-songwriter, and I loved what you said about songwriters earlier. Singer-songwriter that never is going before the people to perform your own songs, but you're writing great melodies and great lyrics for other artists that can take them and interpret them. There are great ways to function in music and music industry, and you don't have to sell your soul to do it.
That's awesome. So tell people where they can find you, follow your work, and get their hands on your new album, Neighbors in an Age of Rage.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. The website is realstevecamp.com. That's REAL, stevecamp.com. The new album is there. You can stream it, download it, order it. That is great. Also, we'd love to have you follow through with me on Facebook. Deal with all kinds of issues there. I love the dialogue. Iron sharpens iron. Or on X. We're active on both of those social media platforms.
Well, Steve, this has been such a joy and personal joy for me as well. Thank you for the music, the honesty, the longevity, the conviction, the humor, and for giving us a conversation with both substance and soul. And personally, thank you for being one of those piano-driven singer-songwriters who made a young musician like me feel like there was room at the bench. That mattered.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Thanks, Heather.
You've been listening to The Heather Patero Show, produced by Heather Patero Studios. Connect with us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit heatherpatero.com. Until next time, stay creative and live on purpose.